My name is Eric Da Silva, and with me today is Alejandro Strong, owner and proprietor of Packraft ME, packraftmaine.com. And today we're going to learn about bike rafting and what bike rafting is and what you need to enjoy a good bike rafting adventure. And we'll make it as easy as a day trip and renting some stuff, or like actually diving all the way in and like making sure you have all the gear on your own. So to begin with, I think we're kind of way off from what we normally do with the Bicycle Coalition of Maine. This isn't really like the core advocacy or education work we typically talk about during a webinar, but there is a lot of, I think, bits of everything that the Bicycle Coalition of Maine stands for. The mission of the coalition is to encourage people to get out and, if possible, like do it through active transportation the whole time. And so a pack raft is considered a part of active transportation. It's very much human powered and using like the natural world to get somewhere. And so this really could enable someone to go from their doorstep and do a trip that would involve a bike and a pack raft and be able to do a really cool loop that doesn't involve any kind of motor vehicle. I would also say, like, having done it with you once, like, it's a lot of fun.
Yeah.
So like a large component of what we try to do at the coalition is encourage people to use biking, to choose walking, and maybe to choose rafting as a way to get around, whether it's for recreation or transportation. So pack rafts combined with a bike make a bike rafting trip, and they are a lot of fun. So I know a lot of folks like to look for new things to do when they get on a bike. Maybe it's a new road that they find or a new trail. Like, this is a whole nother level of new. A lot of good times can kind of come out of this. So anyway, Alejandro, thanks so much for joining us today. And we're in your dining room, and we got like the pack raft set up on the floor, and we got a bike set up to show you what it looks like on the bike. And we're going to go through the whole thing. Like, define this stuff for you and explain how you actually combine bikes and rafting and getting out together. So, well, without further ado, do you want to kick it off?
Yeah. So going back to the question about how does this connect to Bicycle Coalition of Maine, there's a few things I think bike rafting connects to this sort of larger mission. And I want to actually start with the Maine part, because bike rafting is pretty new in Maine, but I want to argue that it is like a perfect way to get out and explore Maine. Maine is this amazing mix of land and water that's pretty evenly balanced. And so what a pack raft allows us to do is sort of start to use some of those closer waterways and really find adventure in them. So a canoe, a big kayak, it's sometimes a waste to go onto a small pond with it. You have your eyes set on something further off. You want to get to the Allagash, you want to get Flagstaff Lake, Moosehead, somewhere bigger. But with the pack raft, it's so light that it's easy to sort of explore these close places. So it really, to me, it promotes this idea of adventuring close to home. And then when you combine it with the bike, you really can go sort of back and forth between biking on trails, roads, getting onto the water. And it's this combination of the two. So it's active transport. I have actually bike rafted my commute before. That was a lot of fun. Get a little whitewater in after work. So there's a lot of ways that it can be combined and sort of fit in with the advocacy. Bike joy and paddling joy are sort of have the same feeling when you do them close to each other. So yeah, lots of crossover there.
Cool. Why don't we take a look at some of the stuff that let's try to define like what this bike rafting thing is.
Yeah. So one place to start is the pack raft. So let's see if we can get a camera angle here. So this red boat right down here that you're seeing, it's about 8 feet long. This is a solo pack raft. It's made by Alpaca, as you can see here, in Mancos, Colorado. They really started this sport And this is the Caribou model, which is made for bike rafting. And then if we also scan over, sorry for the crazy footage, it's the same boat as right here on the handlebars. So this is what makes a pack raft a pack raft, is that you have an 8-foot boat that's a fully capable boat, can carry 350 pounds of gear, can fit on your handlebar. It can fit in your backpacks really easily. So looking back at the boat, this boat is made to sort of travel over, it's good for whitewater, it's good for flat water. I wouldn't really want to do it take it on a big lake crossing. Its top speed is about 2 to 3 miles an hour, and 3 miles an hour, you're working pretty hard. So anybody coming from a canoeing or kayaking background is going to scoff a little bit about those speeds. That would be really slow in a canoe. And that's working here. You can see how the bike is attached here, just using a couple of volley straps. You can really use anything. You could use P-cord, webbing, anything to attach it down. And I would go through rapids with it in this condition. So this is really the wild thing, is that's your bike up there. It fits on pretty well. So this back and forth of the boat on the bike to the bike on the boat. Do people have any boat specific questions?
Well, what are we looking at when we're looking at the size? We can see the size on the bike behind you, Alejandro. It's pretty. I'll try to hold this. The mic's not great. So I know like the size is pretty compact. It looks like the size of maybe a compact tent, like a 2-3 person tent when it's rolled up. How much does it weigh when it's rolled up like this?
So this boat is 8 pounds, and that's including the seat and some other gear that goes with it. And it's a roll that's about it's an 8-inch diameter by probably about 15 inches long. So that easily fits in your backpack, handlebars. If you have a back rack, you can put it on there. So a lot of good options there.
Do you know about the history of the pack raft? Like, what were people using in the first days? Like, were they small little 8-pound rigs like this thing?
So the first pack rafts were either like a Sevalor boat you would buy at Walmart, those like sort of dinghy style boats that don't last very long, or people were actually taking Army surplus single person rescue boats, which weigh a lot. So there was sort of the origins of bike rafting. They called it hell biking. I try and get a little bit away from that term, but it was basically they just sort of picked 2 points. This is often in Alaska, and said we want to get from here to here. We're going to use bikes, and usually there are points across rivers. So they needed to just get boats across rivers, and then eventually they started going down the rivers. And there was one guy going, and he just his brats were falling apart on him. And his mom was had spent her time building ski gear, and so he went to her and he said, "Hey, could you design me a better boat?" And so she started with tape and just like Tyvek sheeting, built a boat that way, and then slowly built up. And the two of them started Alpaca Rafts. So they really are the origin of the sports. They're about a little over 20 years old now. So it's still, a pretty young sport in terms of its like full version of it.
Yeah, I remember. So Alejandro sent me a link for the original hell biking story, which was in National Geographic back in like 1990 or 80 something. I don't remember. Anyway, it looked, I would say that the rafting part was probably the easiest part of that trip.
Yeah.
But hiking through tundra, usually carrying bikes through like knee deep snow. Oh my gosh. And back in the day, like nothing, like you're saying, nothing was specific for this type of adventure. So it was all jerry-rigged and thrown together and quite heavy. So now we have something that I would call pretty deluxe.
Yeah.
Stuff that's made for, like, even rafts that are marketed for bike rafting because they're very lightweight and they're easy to strap to a bike and carry without being too cumbersome. And the other thing, which I don't know that the camera showed really well, but the pack is full of lash points. So by that, I mean, like, it's really easy to take. Let me show you what these volet straps look like. So here's the volet straps, and they're just like these really nice buckled and slightly stretchy straps that can be used to hold on the gear onto the pack raft. And it's very easy with all the lashing points that are built into the pack raft.
So going back to hell biking, I want to just like make it really clear that bike rafting is scalable from a really short, easy, like leisurely day where you bike out to a pond, you float around on the pond and just sort of enjoy the sun and then bike back, all the way up to the sort of more hardcore, really pushing adventure. And so it's not one or the other. It's kind of you can make it the trip you want to be. And I would say for a lot of the bike rafting trips you do, the most difficult part is kind of getting your logistics organized the first few times. So, figuring out how to put the bike onto the boat. Like, it takes a few times to get it on snugly, to make sure that you have a balance from side to side so your boat's not leaning over. If you haven't done any bike packing, so you aren't used to carrying loads on your bikes, like, that takes a little bit of getting used to. But really, it's like, what I've noticed is every time I go, I change my system up a little bit. And it's more about just getting comfortable in the way that sort of getting my system set. So it's not that there's the ideal way, but we're adding this extra bit that is beyond just biking and paddling, is the sort of moving of gear from one spot to the next.
There's one of the questions that has just come up in the chat is related to your balancing the bike. Like, how do you make sure that the raft isn't going to like tip over as far as your weight and other ballast with this like kind of front heavy setup with the bike strapped to the front of the raft?
So when you put the boat in the water with the bike on it and you're not sitting there, it's going to look like the worst idea you've ever come up with. Like your bike's
like that.
Yeah, the bike's going to be almost in the water, and then you get in the boat, and the bike is going to come up really and is going to stay out of the water. Your bigger concern is side to side. So what I do is I load the boat, sort of eye it, and then I put it in the water and I hold the back end down and I see if, like, from left to right, is it flat? The sort of front and back, the boats are designed to have a lot of load up in the front. Even before bike rafting, when people were pack rafting, they would strap their backpack onto the front of the boat. And what it actually does is it puts weight forward and then you in the back, and it flattens out the boat. So I've had a few people paddle with me who remarked that they thought the boat actually paddled better with the bike on it than without, which anybody who's a canoe or a kayaker will say, well, that just shows how well the boats paddle. But that extra weight can actually help out a little bit.
Did you talk about the paddle itself?
So you can do this with any paddle, but a couple of the manufacturers are now making 4-piece paddles. So you have your shaft comes into 2 pieces, and then the paddle blades come off the shaft. So this allows for something that's extremely packable. You can see, or I'll show you in a second, behind Eric is a backpack that's loaded. There's a paddle in there. There's a life jacket in there. It's everything you need. I have also gone with like just the regular breakdown 2-piece kayak paddle I have, and just had it sticking, either off the back of my bike or way up off of my pack. You don't want to ride a lot of trails that way, but like if it's the paddle you have, it will work. Like you don't always have to have the most specialized gear to make it work.
What about as far as inflating and deflating the pack? What does that process look like? I'm thinking like how I have like a Thermarest sleeping camping pad, and you are going to inflate it with your mouth. You're not doing that here, are you?
So we have this bag here is a bellows. So just like the new Thermarests have that sort of bellows system where it's the bag you put onto the spout and you can squeeze air into it. You would screw this onto the boat, shake it open, and then you can squeeze all of this air into it. For these boats, it's about 6 to 7 times. And then your boat is mostly full. You can top it off with your mouth, or I have a small hand pump that you can finish that with. They do make little like battery powered electric pumps, that are, the size of about like 2 GoPros. Those work really well. But this doesn't run out of batteries. And it's kind of it's a nice little, exercise in frustration. But it's one of the really cool things about these boats is that it's all been thought out in the sort of lightest weight, simplest mode possible.
And then when you go to deflate, it's got a different chamber that you unscrew, or not a different chamber, but a different valve.
Yeah.
And the air spills out of it very quickly.
Yeah. And some boats, like you'll notice on the back of this boat that there's this big black line on the back. That's actually a gear zipper. Not every boat has that, but that's an airtight, waterproof zipper. So don't do it. But if Eric was to open it, that would let all the air out of the boat. So not every pack raft has this, but it's becoming more and more standard on them. If anyone's ever worn a dry suit, it's the tie zip. It's the same kind of zipper used in that. The really nice thing about that is it allows you to actually put gear into the boat, and it gets your weight really low down. So if we were to do, a multi-night camping trip that was bike rafting, you're like all your stuff from your backpack could be put into there.
And there's only one chamber. Yes, to answer another question that came up.
There are a few boats that are made with 2 chambers. So like a lot of federally run rivers out west need you need a multi-chambered boat. So it is possible to get some. The other thing that they do now is there are inflatable dry bags that fit in the hulls. I don't have any, but it's, that's another option to give yourself a little bit of backup air in there. I have not popped a raft. And I carry a repair kit, but they are surprisingly durable. And I'm taking them down whitewater. I'm hitting rocks. I'm not babying them, but I am careful with them. But it's like one of the things that sort of I've learned as I've pack raft more and more is that I can trust the strength of the fabric a lot more than I originally thought.
And if you did get a hole while you were out, are you prepared to patch a small something or other?
Yeah, when you buy a boat, you have some options to buy different repair kits. I carry a few with me. Those of us who are used to repairing bike tubes, it's really not that different. A little bit of abrasion, a little bit of glue, and a patch. If you get a bigger rip, there's actually people that will sew before they do this. There's
like a tire.
Yeah, there's lots of, you can find videos of people doing it, and it's sort of one of the victory scars, we might say, of the sport. But I think it's sort of like everybody's fears about tubeless. Everyone has that fear about, not that we need to enter that debate here, but like everyone has this fear of the pack raft popping. And I think if you were to talk to a lot of pack rafters, you would find that it was not as common as the fear makes it out to be.
I think the only part that you're usually concerned with is the pedal. And even with that, like I've read that some bike rafters will remove the pedal that's facing the raft. But when we went together, we just kind of put like a sock over the pedal, and that just removed the likelihood that the pedal pins were going to puncture or scrape enough that it would eventually wear through and create a hole. But otherwise, like you're not doing anything special with these bikes. We're just putting them on. And other than that pedal, if you had like sharp things, you'd watch out for that. But most bikes are ready to go on a raft.
Yeah. So if you have like the big mountain bike flats with the bolts sticking up to destroy the bottom of your shoes, like that's to be worried about. The other culprit is brake cables. If you have a loose brake cable, and we always put gear side up. It's good for photos, and it keeps all the gears sort of, or drive side up. It keeps all that away from the
bicycle drivetrain.
Yeah. But yeah, like I've seen people try and sell like a piece of fabric that goes between the bike and the boat, and then everyone says we don't need that. We haven't been using it for a long time. So a lot of people take the pedal off, or at least the bottom pedal. I find I did that. There's a few times one time I did it, and I forgot my wrench, and so then I was stuck with a half screwed in pedal and destroyed my crank. So now I just take a bag and wrap it around it. Sometimes it's my hat, sometimes it's croc. Yeah.
And they do make, another question, they do make single boats, which is what this red one is right here. And there's one in the handlebars, a single boat, but they do make tandem boats too, which.
Yes, they make tandem boats. Bike rafting in a tandem boat is difficult. I've done it once and there was not a lot of space. So putting a bike on the back of the boat is harder to do. So the tandem bike rafting is, I guess if you had a tandem bicycle, you could get that on the front. But two bikes on a boat is hard to do. It's doable. I've heard of people towing an extra boat with the bikes in it. But it's not as easy to do.
Sounds like a challenge that we need to get in there and give it another try. Streamline this tandem process. All right, let's talk about where do we go? You alluded to like this not having to be a hell biking trip, that you don't have to go to Alaska. You don't have to find the most remote place in Maine to embark on a bike rafting trip. What type of waterways and what do you need near the waterway, like trail or road, in order to like dip your feet in? And then kind of what are you looking for when you try to do something a little bit bigger as well? What are the key components?
So like if you're in southern Maine, I think an ideal spot to start is the Presumpscot. So you have a really strong mix of like trails nearby, and then you have flowing water with multiple access points. So hopefully we'll share a link with you, but there's, the Presumpscot trails have a ton of information on them. So things I like about that is I really like when I have more than one access point. So I'm not just paddling, from the boat ramp around and back to the same spot. I could do that in any boat. So, I'm looking at Maine Trail Finders. I'm looking at the door, trying to find.
Mike just fell on the floor.
Trying to find some spots that have multiple access points. If I can find flowing water, that's going to make my day a lot easier. So, this can be done in whitewater, but I would definitely say do it on flat water first. Get used to the whole setup, and you probably won't be paddling as hard a whitewater as you would normally without the bike. So rivers with flow, awesome. Small ponds, protected parts of lakes are all great. I'm avoiding bigger lakes, and I am avoiding saltwater, mostly because of the bike. The rafts are fine in saltwater, but saltwater also tends to be sort of bigger open water. One thing I think about is the wind direction. So if I'm going on flat water and I can start and end in either spot, I'll look at what the wind's doing that day, and I will have a much nicer day if I'm going with the wind than against it. The boats are like sails, so that can be really nice sometimes. So then the next thing you're thinking about is like, what's the type of biking you want to be doing? So if you live in a spot where you have trails that are near water, then you could probably be doing mountain biking, gravel riding to these spots. More likely, you may end up with some road riding. Another place that's in the Bangor area that I really like to do is anything on the main branch of the Penobscot River. We have good road access. The trails in Orono, Bangor really aren't that far away from it. So you can put together a loop that's, 60, 70% on trails, some time on roads, and then you get nice moving water, a little bit of whitewater if you want. And the Penobscot River Paddling Trail, it has a series, their website has a really great interactive map that talks about where the rapids are, where the portages are. They have free campsites on there. So if you're thinking about doing like an overnight bike raft trip, I've done a few on the Penobscot River and really enjoy doing those.
And I did upload the link for both the Penobscot and the Penobscot. You and I did the Penobscot.
Yeah.
One thing that I think was really handy is that because there's so much good public access, like we went down a little bit less far than we originally intended, and there was a good takeout point. So there's a lot of flexibility in either going a little bit further if things are going really well, or pulling out sooner if you're running out of daylight or something else is going on.
Yeah. And then if you want to go further away, Katahdin Woods and Water, excellent biking, and the East Branch is an amazing river to paddle. Again, there's whitewater on it, but there's portage trails around every major rapid. If you look at sort of the Katahdin 360 bike loop that people have done, that section where most people are having the least fun biking is the section you would paddle. So if, I don't know that it's been done yet, but a bike rafting Katahdin 360 loop would be like a perfect sort of pushy trip to do, more pushy on the biking, I think, than the paddling. The Moosehead region, a lot of great dirt roads. The East Outlet is one of my favorite whitewater spots with pack rafts. There's ATV and gravel roads just on the Greenville side of it that give you some great loop options. The thing there is it's a river that doesn't get paddled very much because it's hard to do the shuttle on if you're doing it with cars. But now that we can do it with bikes or hiking, it's a perfect spot for pack rafts and bike rafting.
Yeah, and that goes way back to what we were talking about originally. Like, how can you rely less on the motor vehicle and do this just with your own ingenuity and, well, pretty clever pieces of equipment too.
Yeah. And I would say that there aren't a lot of people doing this. So you're going to have to be a little creative in your routes. Like, you're going to have to go back and forth from your favorite bike route finder, and then you're going to have to go look on paddling pages. And so this is actually something I really like about the sport is that element of route planning, creativity. It's here because nobody else has set it up for us. The link that was shared earlier about the Facebook group, it's a pretty new group, not super active, but people are starting to post hiking and pack rafting and biking and pack rafting trips there. So that's a good starting point. And hopefully as the sport grows, that'll become a more active site.
And I also pasted the Maine Trail Finder webpage in there. How would someone use that as a resource for bike rafting?
So Main Trail Finder, you can select your activity and there's a paddling option. So it's fairly limited. It's mostly spots with downriver races and then like state parks. So don't take that as like an exhaustive resource, but it'll give you good information, especially on like class 1 to class 2 whitewater spots. So if you're looking to get into river paddling, that's a good spot. Also, if you're looking at their biking and hiking trails, like, they have maps, you can see often where there's a water access. I've used the word water access a lot, and we don't need a boat ramp. We need a trail to the water, and we need a spot either like onshore or like a little bit up the trail, like where we can sort of lay our boat out, get everything sorted. But it really doesn't have to be a full boat ramp. There's plenty of spots I've started where, it was a scramble down a bank and we had just enough of a beach to inflate a raft, and that was perfect. So, it's a little less or a lot less is needed than if we were driving up to a spot to sort of unload our boats. So that's also one of the exciting things for me is kind of like, what's the least good access point that I can use? And really, it's as long as we're allowed to be there, I think we can make it work and not be disruptive.
All right. So it sounds like if I wanted to get into bike rafting, most of the people on this call are going to have a bike already, or at least one, if not more, but they might not have a raft. So if we want to go out and just buy a inexpensive raft that could get it done, what should someone budget?
So there's more and more pack rafting companies coming out. So there's a fair number of sort of like direct order from China that are in that 400 to 600 range. If then you have Kokopelli, which, if you were to go into REI right now, they'll have Kokopelli pack rafts for sale. And there you're starting to get in the 700 to 1200 range. And then Alpaca, which are made in the US, you're going to be in the sort of 800 to 1600 range. Things that'll make the boats more expensive is if you start putting a skirt and a closed deck on it, that costs more.
And before you go any further,
Yeah.
that would be for for whitewater, to prevent water from going into the boat. Is there another use for having a skirt or a closed deck?
So similar to like a sea kayak, how you would want it just for waves and to stay a little warmer. So some people, if they're planning to do larger lake crossings or spending time in the ocean, they would wear a skirt as well. Most of the boats I have are open, but they are self-bailing, so they have holes in them in the bottom that allow water in and out of them. But I would say, they're not a cheap piece of equipment. So really, for a good boat, you're looking 800 to 1200. Those, as bikers will understand that the used market can be crazy. And the used market right now in pack rafts, used boats are selling at new boat prices. I don't know how long that will last. Alpaca actually, until very recently, has had a multi-month wait list, but they have boats ready to be sold immediately. So that hopefully will lower the used prices. The other option here is that there are places that rent pack rafts. There's a company, Pack Rafting Adventures. They're based in New Jersey. And they have, I think, 30 boats to rent. And the great thing is they can mail it to you. And then there's backcountry pack rafts. I believe they're based in Montana or Utah. And they have a rental program as well. So both of those, if you want to just try a boat, try this once, see if it's something, or you're planning one trip, those are really good options to sort of get a first try in.
Yeah, I just pasted those links. So it sounds like they're buying a boat is, if you're really certain this is something you want to do, it's worth spending $1,000, perhaps. It's up to everyone. The other option is renting through one of those resources. I guess my favorite option is hiring someone, which is where you come in.
Yeah.
So if you were to go to packraftme.com, you could hire a certified Maine guide. You have a lot of experience, used to work for Outward Bound. You're a philosopher as well. So the conversations can be very rich.
But we don't have to go there if you want.
And so what would, I feel like the easiest way to get into this without spending the money and maybe regretting it or having a bad initial experience would be to hire someone like yourself, who's a guide, who can kind of guarantee a good experience and an answer to nearly any problem that might come up. So if someone were to work with Alejandro Strong, what would that provide them?
So there's two options. One, we could do like a private trip. So this could be you as an individual or a group of friends. We could plan a day. So if you wanted to paddle whitewater, if you wanted to do bike rafting, like we can really customize that. The other thing is I have, several different types of alpaca solo boats and tandem boats. So we can bring multiple boats. You can have almost like a demo day for yourself. The other thing I do is I do workshops. So this would be like a mixed group of whoever signs up for those days. So I do swiftwater rescue through the American Canoe Association. I do pack rafting, just sort of whitewater paddling and safety. And I also have some bike rafting workshops that I'm going to do this summer. So those are options there. Also, if you're, like aren't sure if you want to, hire me for a day, but you're thinking about buying a boat, like send me an email, send me a message on whatever social media you find me on. And I'm happy to talk boats. I'm a boat nerd. So, if you know the type of paddling you want to do and aren't sure what's the best boat, I would be happy to have that conversation, over and over again. And again, there's some people on that Packraft Facebook page in Maine with boats, different types. So, they can, if you say, hey, I'm looking at this boat, they may have some information for you about sort of what their review of it.
And so we have Alejandro. We're actually in the process of wrapping up some details for one of the big Bicycle Coalition of Maine events, the Maine Woods Rambler, which takes place up in Millinocket. And this year, we're really excited because we're going to have the whole event gathering is really to support the Rambler, which is a long Sunday gravel grind that goes all around the lakes and through the woods there. We're going to have some mountain biking events, but leading up to this, in the days prior to Sunday, so Friday and Saturday, maybe Thursday, we're still working on those details. Alejandro will be there. So this takes place in September. So there's going to be a chance to sign up for some small group. I guess we can call those workshops.
Yeah.
Workshop.
Days of fun.
Yeah, so you can check those out. And the other thing that you mentioned earlier is that just this morning or very recently, you updated your website with some summer events, workshops, so that you could check that out. These are like the type of workshop where they're open, register, and once they fill up, then you have a good crowd to go somewhere with.
Yeah. And if those dates don't work, let me know. Like we can put together other dates as well.
All right. I think the last thing we wanted to wrap up with is some more resources for you all. I know I really enjoy watching videos, but I think books are probably one of the best resources, books and maps. You can take your time looking at them. So we have a few resources like that, printed resources that Alejandro would like to share.
Yeah. So for pack rafting in general and pack rafting safety, Luke Mehl, MEHL, Pack Raft Handbook is a great resource. It's the best whitewater paddling handbook I've seen. It beats any of the clear kayak ones previously made. I couldn't find it on my shelf, but we'll get a link to it. And then also the Bike Raft Guide by Steve Doom Fastbender. and Lizzie Scully. They run a Four Corners guide service in Colorado, and really are sort of at the forefront of bike rafting and bike rafting education. So that's a great book. It goes a little bit into the history of the hell biking. It has a lot of people's adventure stories, and then just some good details on things you should think about as you plan a bike rafting trip. So both of those I recommend. They're good reads. And they'll, I think if you're, on the fence about whether this is like, a big hobby to take on, thinking about that, I think either of these books are a good mix of entertaining and informative. So it would get you kind of a good feel for what the sport is like. And as you're seeing, there's pretty good photos in it.
And we're going to make Maine. We're making Maine the new Alaska. Just minus the hell part, unless you want the hell part.
There's hell here. So we can get you some black flies and misery and all those things.
Yeah. So speaking of black flies and misery, like I do notice that like your calendar is pretty empty in June for a good reason.
Yeah, May is full, or it's pretty full. A lot of people wanted to like get up to some streams. So I have 2 trips. We're hiking into Wassaquittick Stream. But yeah, June is currently pretty empty, and I'm not sad about that. But I think June's a great time for day trips. And then, there will be great paddling in July, really through, well, so far I'm on track to paddle at least one day a month, trying to keep that going. It's doable, but my guiding season is really sort of late March to end of October.
When we went last month, it was actually a fantastic day. It was like kind of like the Sunday we just had, where it was blue sky and above freezing. But we both had dry suits on, so we could have been in the water and been fine. We were definitely prepared and doing it safe. I wouldn't advise anyone to go out there right now unless they were prepared with the right equipment so that they could stay alive and healthy, even overboard. We were in a very calm place on the Penobscot River.
Yeah, and we avoided a couple rapids that in the summer we would have paddled no problem. So just like making conservative choices. And if you are going to do anything in cold water, definitely read up on cold water drowning to kind of scare yourself a little bit. It's a real thing. It's scary, but you can make the right choices to do it safely.
So that's everything that we had on our outline, but I think we haven't really got like a close up of this bike. So let me move the camera around and you can kind of see exactly what the pack raft looks like with the boat in it. So here's the bow, and this is the zipper that we were talking about earlier. This was probably one of the parts of the boat that was most impressive to me, because to hold air in this giant zipper, I mean, it's just a really cool, ingenious zipper design. And you can just throw stuff in this too. Before you inflate it, you can unzip it and put your backpack and your food and anything that you might not need during the actual rafting trip can be stored in the stern of the boat. And it works really well. Just like panniers on a bike, if you hang them really low, you get this nice center of gravity that keeps you well balanced. And so here's the inside of the boat, and there's the back panel that kind of supports you. This boat, I think those are knee braces, right, Alejandro?
Yeah, so this boat, because it's set up for whitewater, these are sort of thigh strap knee braces. So you would put your knees in here. They hold you in the boat. And this actually would allow someone, not really with the bike on, but somebody who has like a roll and a kayak, you can bring yourself upright with your paddle. Even on flat water, they just provide you, like they anchor you in the boat a little bit more, and make it a little easier to paddle. Most boats you get would not have this, would not have these plates. It would be a lot simpler just to keep the weight lower.
And there's also inflatable seat here. Is that pretty standard? So
Yeah,
this is kind of like a second air chamber, but it wouldn't actually count as a second air chamber on a federally required
yeah,
river.
I don't think the Rangers would, but yeah, all but well, some people will, to go extra light, will remove their seat, but every boat's going to come with at least a partial seat. It may look a lot smaller than this. This one also has a sort of foot pad in the front, that shinier part. That's to lock you into the thigh strap.
We're dealing with sliding laptops here.
So the knee braces do not have a quick release, but if you push your feet, if you kick your feet up and drop your knees, you come out very quickly. So it is in the same way where if you were in a whitewater kayak and you popped your skirt, you would still need to sort of take the pressure off your knees. It's that same movement. And it is harder to stay in the thigh straps than it is to come out. But I find that for a person just starting out in whitewater, this is a lot less intimidating than a closed kayak. You can see, well, you can't really see, but there's 4 strap plates that the bike is attached to.
1, and then there's 2, 3.
Yep.
And then we got the 4th one over here by the front wheel and the fork.
And I would say that I usually end up using 4 to 6 straps to attach the boats. This setup here is only with 4, but just there's a couple different ways you can do it. There's a little bit of bounce in there. This would be fine for flat water. I would want it a little tighter for whitewater. If we come over, yeah. So looking at the boat actually on the handlebars, if anybody has like a bike packing bag that's sort of like a dry bag harness, those work really well. But all I have here is just 2 straps around the raft onto here. There is, like all bike raft bag or bike packing bags, there's some concern about your handlebar or your cables going through. It's the same question with, just sort of any bag you put on there. You could put this in your backpack, but anybody who's had bikes with a backpack with any load knows that the more weight you can get off of there. And then looking at this bag here, this has my life jacket, paddle, the inflation bag, everything I need for just a day of paddling. So with no specialized bike packing bags, I'm able to sort of get all my stuff to the river. Now, if I added a rack or a saddle bag and a frame bag, I could get all of this stuff off of my back and onto the bike. It is possible to bring a bike trailer, but you need one that can disassemble or fold to become small enough. The only one that I found that works fairly well is the Farfur trailers, which I think is Farley Bicycle makes them. That one you can take the wheel off and then the trailer comes into multiple pieces. And I'm able to sort of put that in with the bike. And it doesn't take a lot of extra stuff. I think we had a comment earlier about what's a good bike to use. And I would say it's the bike you have. I've done this road bikes, gravel bikes, mountain bikes. Some people are really excited about folding bikes and pack rafting. I've seen people put their folding bike into a dry bag and go bike rafting. That's awesome, but you don't need a folding bike to do this. I've gone with my fat bike. That was great. I've had people with, 90s mountain bikes with 26-inch wheels. That was great. 27.5, great. 29, great. The bike you like is the one that you will end up arguing is the best bike rafting bike. I don't think there is one. It's just about the sort of the biking you're doing along with the paddling.
Well, thanks, Alejandro.
Yeah.
Does anyone have any questions that they'd like to ask before Alejandro and I shut down the Zoom? And thank you all for joining. All right, well, all those resources are there in the chat. Check those out. If you've registered for this, you will get an email later with all those resources again. So don't worry about having to copy and paste them right now. I'll include those in the thank you email later on. Let's see, one person just wrote, great talk. Well, thank you.
Thanks.
So next week, if you want to join us for a webinar, we're going to be doing one on bike safety rodeos. It's a webinar for anyone that's interested in hosting a bike safety rodeo, or if they want to know how to put one together specifically, like what does it take? Bike rodeos are super, super fun. I do a lot of rodeos for schools, but I've also had adults engage in them. And a rodeo is essentially like the way we do it at the BCM is that we create a traffic course that's continuous flow. Kids enter an entrance, and then they have to navigate through intersections and turns, stop signs, and two-way traffic, of course, other traffic on the road. And then 2 weeks from now, we're doing an instructor webinar. So if you're interested in being a bicycle and pedestrian safety education instructor and working with the BCM, please join that webinar. We actually have a program that we're starting to run this spring. And right now we're taking applications for people that want to be instructors. We do provide a stipend for your time and travel expenses. It's a great program to do part-time, or if you're retired or want to do in addition to a full-time job. It's a great way to just earn some money, but also give back to the community and ensure people are staying safe. So with that, thank you very much. Thank you, Alejandro, very much for joining and sharing. Yeah. And I really look forward to getting out with you again.
Definitely.
When it's warmer, hopefully.
Yeah.
Definitely sunny. I guess that's all it takes.
It helps.
Take care, everyone.
Bye.